Here's a tradition you think is older than your grandmother. A man saves for months, buys a diamond ring, kneels, and proves his love with a stone that lasts forever. Ancient rite, sacred, except it isn't. Almost none of this existed before 1940. Go back to 1940, and only about 1 in 10 American brides got a diamond engagement ring. 1 in 10. The custom you were told is timeless is younger than the grandmother who taught you it was timeless. So where did it come from? Not a church, not a king. It came from a sales slump. In 1938, diamond prices had been sliding for years, and one company that controlled almost every diamond on Earth picked up the phone and called an advertising agency in Philadelphia. Not to sell more rings, to invent the reason you would buy one. And they didn't just tell you to buy a ring. They told you exactly how much to bleed for it. That rule you've heard, that the ring should cost about a month's salary, they wrote it. Then, in the 1980s, they doubled it to 2 months. Their actual slogan asked, and I promise I am not making this up, how can you make 2 months' salary last forever? A budget dressed up as devotion. The company was De Beers, and the story it was about to sell you would become the single most successful piece of advertising in history, and one of the most expensive lies you will ever pay for yourself. This is how a mining cartel taught the entire world that love costs 2 months' pay. A diamond is forever. The markup is immediate. Here's the part nobody put in the pitch. The agency, a firm named Ayer, did not treat this as selling a product. Read their own brief. They wrote that they were dealing, and I am quoting them, with a problem in mass psychology. The goal was not a prettier ring. It was to make the diamond, in their words, a psychological necessity. Sit with that phrase, psychological necessity. They were not going to convince you a diamond was beautiful. You already knew that. They were going to wire the diamond into the one moment you can't opt out of, the proposal, so that not buying one felt like not loving her enough. That's not advertising. That's engineering. And they engineered the size, too. The strategy spelled it out in writing. Teach the public that the larger the diamond, the greater the love expressed. Notice what that does. It turns a carat count into a love score. Now the ring isn't a gift, it's evidence, and bigger evidence costs more. Then they built the whole world around it. The agency planted diamonds in Hollywood, writing to studios to arrange romantic scenes, lending real stones to movie stars, even getting a movie red-idled. Swapping diamonds are dangerous for adventures in diamonds, the same rock with a friendlier name. They sent lecturers into high school assemblies to talk to thousands of teenage girls about engagement rings. Queens, actresses, seeded on purpose. Everywhere you looked, the diamond was already there. Of course it felt like tradition. That was the budget. And if you think you would never fall for something this manufactured, look at Japan. Before 1967, the diamond engagement ring basically did not exist there, under 5% of brides. De Beers hired an agency, ran the exact same play, and by 1981, about 60% of Japanese brides had one. A whole nation's tradition, installed in 14 years on schedule. Back home, American brides with a diamond went from around 1 in 10 in 1940 to roughly 80% by the 1980s. And the money proves it. Watch 2 lines climb together. In 1939, American wholesale diamond sales were about $23 million. By 1979, $2.1 billion. That's roughly 90 times bigger. Over the same years, the ad budget went from around $200,000 to $10 million. Demand didn't grow on its own. Demand was manufactured, dollar for dollar. And in 1947, a copywriter at the agency named Frances Gerardi, a woman writing for an industry aimed at women, was tired one night and scribbled 4 words before she went to bed. A diamond is forever. It first ran in 1948. Half a century later, the trade Bible Ad Age named it the #1 advertising slogan of the entire 20th century. It is a brilliant line. It is also a trap. because forever does two jobs at once. It tells you the stone is eternal, so you don't feel foolish spending months of pay on it. And it quietly tells you something else, that you will never sell it. A thing that is forever is a thing that never comes back to the market. Hold onto that word. Forever is how they kept you from ever checking the resale price. To sell scarcity, you first have to own the supply. So rewind to 1888, South Africa. A British businessman named Cecil Rhodes merges the big Kimberley mines into a single company, De Beers Consolidated Mines. The next year he buys out his last serious rival for just over £5 million, the largest single transaction the Cape Colony had ever seen. By 1889, one company controls about 90% of the world's rough diamonds. The man who turned that monopoly into a machine came later, Ernest Oppenheimer. He built a mining empire called Anglo-American in 1917, took the chairman's seat at De Beers in 1929, and asked the question every cartel asks: how do we control not just the mines, but the price? The answer was a single room in London. Nearly every rough diamond on earth was funneled through one sales channel, the syndicate. A few times a year, 30 or 40 hand-picked buyers were invited to a viewing called a sight. You were handed a sealed box of diamonds at a price De Beers set. No negotiating, no cherry-picking. Take the box or lose your seat at the table. That is not a market. That's a faucet, and De Beers held the tap. And here is the mechanism that made forever pay. When too many diamonds came out of the ground, De Beers did not lower the price. It bought up the surplus and locked it in a vault. They called themselves the custodian of the market. Strip the poetry. They hoarded diamonds so you would believe there weren't many. The scarcity you paid for was scarcity they built on purpose. And let's kill the rarity myth properly. Diamonds are not rare the way rubies or emeralds are rare. Geologically, they are fairly common. There are, quite literally, vaults full of them. What made them precious was never scarcity in the earth. It was scarcity at the counter, enforced by one company deciding how many you were ever allowed to see. Rare by permission. That's the whole trick. So put it together. One company owned the mine, set the price, and wrote the story. The stone wasn't rare. The love math was invented. And the only thing standing between you and that fact was a price you would never test, because who actually sells the ring? Which brings us to the money. What is a diamond really worth the second you walk out of the store? You are not going to like the answer. Let's do the math, because the math is the entire story. When you buy a diamond ring at retail, you are paying a markup over the wholesale price of roughly 100 to 200%, sometimes much more on the small stones. That by itself isn't a crime. Every sharp marks up. The crime is what happens next. Try to sell it back. The resale market for a used diamond is opaque and brutal, so I'll give you a range, not a fake precise number. A reputable buyer will typically pay you somewhere between 20 and 50% of what you paid at retail. A pawn shop, less, often 20 to 30. I can't hand you one clean figure because the secondary market is deliberately murky. And that murkiness is not an accident. It's the point. Put real numbers on it. The average American engagement ring runs about $5,200 today. Walk it back to the counter the next morning, and a reputable buyer might give you somewhere between $1,000 and $2,600 for it. You paid $5,200. You are holding back maybe half of that, often much less. $2,000 to $4,000, evaporated, not over 10 years. The moment you leave the store, gone. A diamond is forever. The markup is immediate. And they made sure you would never test it by wrapping the purchase in a moment where checking the price feels obscene. You don't haggle over an engagement ring. You don't resell the symbol of your marriage. The sentiment is the lark on the vault. You built the cage yourself, and they handed you the story to do it with. So why is there no real resale market? By design. Think about it for a second. If millions of people could easily resell their diamonds, there would suddenly be a flood of cheap second-hand stones competing with the shiny new ones, and the whole illusion of scarcity collapses. so the industry simply never built a place for you to sell. Back in 1982, a journalist named Edward J. Epstein asked the question that still detonates the entire business. Have you ever tried to sell a diamond? Go on, try it. You'll learn very fast what your forever stone is actually worth. That is the whole trick, and it is older than you are. They didn't sell you a diamond. They sold you the story and kept the receipt. The stone goes on your hand. The value stays with them, and you were told that's romance. Now, did anyone ever get in trouble for this? Sort of. And here I have to be very careful, because the internet will confidently tell you that De Beers was convicted of overcharging you on your engagement ring. That is not what happened, and the difference matters. The United States government first went after De Beers all the way back in 1945. The case got thrown out in 1948 on a technicality. The court couldn't reach a company that refused to set foot in America. So for decades, De Beers just sold to you from a safe distance. Fast forward to 1994. A grand jury in Ohio indicts De Beers and General Electric for fixing the price of industrial diamonds, the gritty ones used in drills and saw blades, not engagement rings. General Electric was acquitted. The government, in the court's words, failed to prove its case, and De Beers, once again, was out of reach. Then, in 2004, the real one. De Beers pleaded guilty, an actual criminal guilty plea for fixing the price of industrial diamonds, and it paid a $10 million fine. Court proven, admitted, done. Hold on to that, because it's the only price fixing De Beers ever actually pled guilty to. And notice what it was about. Industrial diamonds, not the rock on your finger. On the ring itself, the consumer diamonds, there were lawsuits, and they were serious. They alleged that De Beers monopolized supply, propped up prices, and ran false advertising. In 2008, De Beers settled those claims for $295 million. But read the settlement closely. De Beers admitted no wrongdoing. It paid the money, accepted a court order to stop, and never conceded the underlying claim. So I won't tell you a court proved they gouged you on your ring. I'll tell you they were accused of exactly that and paid nearly $300 million to make it go away. You can sit with that distinction yourself. There is a far darker chapter I'll only touch here because it deserves its own film. For years, diamonds mined in war zones, so-called blood diamonds, funded brutal civil wars in Africa until an international scheme called the Kimberley Process tried to certify stones as conflict-free. The point for us is narrow. The pure, romantic gem on the ad had a supply chain most buyers never saw. The story on the poster was never the whole story. What finally broke the monopoly wasn't a courtroom, though. It was competition. In 1996, a giant Australian mine walked out of the cartel and sold its own diamonds. Russian and Canadian stones flooded in. De Beers' share of the world's rough fell from around 90% in the 1980s to about 63% by 2000 to roughly a third of the market today. The faucet suddenly had other taps. But here's the twist that should bother you. The cartel cracked, and the price story did not. De Beers lost its grip on the supply, but you kept right on believing the diamond was rare, precious, forever. The machine that built the myth was dying, and the myth just kept walking around on its own, until something identical and far cheaper walked in the door. For the entire con to keep working, one thing had to stay true. A diamond had to be special. Then a lab grew one. Same carbon, same crystal structure, same sparkle. Optically and chemically identical, not a fake, a real diamond, just grown in a few weeks instead of a billion years. And it sells for a fraction. Lab-grown wholesale prices have fallen roughly 74% since 2020, and by De Beers' own account, as much as 90% since 2018. The forever stone, it turns out, can be printed. And buyers noticed fast. In 2019, lab-grown stones were about 12% of the center diamonds in American engagement rings. By 2024, 52%. In 5 years, the lab gem went from a curiosity to the majority. Couples looked at an identical stone at a fraction of the price and finally asked the question De Beers spent 80 years praying you would never ask. Why am I paying for the story? De Beers saw it coming, and its response is almost poetry. In 2018, it launched its own lab-grown brand, Lightbox, selling made-in-a-lab diamonds at a flat $800 a carat, a move that quietly admitted its natural stones were priced on a story, not on cost. Then in 2025, it shut Lightbox down. The company that told you a diamond is forever couldn't make the honest version pay either. Meanwhile, the natural business is bleeding. Rough diamond prices have fallen around 40% from their 2022 peak. In 2024, De Beers' revenue dropped 23% to about $3.3 billion. The demand they spent an entire century manufacturing is at last quietly deflating. And here is the number that ends the story. De Beers' parent company, Anglo-American, has written down the value of De Beers 3 years running, booking losses of roughly $1.6 billion, then $2.9 billion, then $2.3 billion. A business once carried at nearly $8 billion is now valued at about $2.3. In 2024, Anglo announced it wants out completely. It is selling De Beers off. The company that invented forever is being sold for parts. And follow that fortune all the way down. In 1889, one company paid £5 million to corner the mines. In 2011, the founding Oppenheimer family sold its stake in De Beers for $5.1 billion, cashing out of the empire the story built. Today, that same business is written down to around $2.3 billion and hunting for a buyer. 130 years of manufactured forever, unwinding in real time. So here's the turn, and it's why this is your story, not just a history lesson. The playbook never died. Manufacture scarcity. Manufacture desire. Hide the resale price so nobody ever sees what the thing is really worth. That's not just diamonds. That's the limited edition drop that sells out in 90 seconds. The numbered collectible. The handbag with a waitlist. The watch they swear is an investment. Every time you're sold something as rare and forever, ask who controls the supply and then try to sell it back the next morning. You already know how that feels. A diamond is forever. That part was always true in the cruelest way. It stays on your hand forever because almost nobody wants to buy it back. The tradition was written by a copywriter. The scarcity was built in a vault. The price was a story, and the story is finally collapsing under a stone you can grow in an oven. So the next time someone tells you a purchase is an investment in something eternal, remember that the most famous 4 words in advertising were written to stop you from ever checking the price. You were sold a story. Here's the number underneath it.